In 1889, while immigrant laborers suffered from the lack of a minimum wage, standard hours in their work week, and any child labor protections, Jane Addams, humanitarian, feminist, arts and fair labor advocate, Nobel Prize laureate, and simply one of the most influential women in American history, arrived here in Chicago and established America's first prominent settlement house, the Hull House. Hello, Windy City travelers and explorers. Tour guide Andy here with Free Tours by Foot. I make weekly videos about Chicago's past and present, including tips to help you save time and money during your stay. And today, I'd like to give you a guided history tour on the topic of Jane Addams and labor conditions in the late 1800s, and show you a very special place you can visit when you're in town. Born in Cedarville, Illinois in 1860, Jane Addams' family was pretty well off financially, but that doesn't mean she had it easy. She was the youngest of 8 children of Sarah and John H. Addams. Her mother tragically died during childbirth when Jane was only 2 years old. And when she was 4, Jane was diagnosed with Pott's disease, and that affected her spine and caused her physical and mental agonies for most of her life. From a young age, it's clear that Addams wanted to help the poor. She was one of the first women to attend college at Rockford Female Seminary in 1881. She received a bachelor's degree, which at that time was practically unheard of, and was not going to stop her education there. She wanted to study medicine, again to help the poor, with one of her sisters in Philadelphia, but life had other plans. In 1881, her father, who himself was an influential American figure, he was a friend of Abraham Lincoln, and beloved by his daughter, suddenly passed away. And Jane Addams' depression and her Pott's disease condition caused her to leave medical school. Now, from what I've read, she inherited a large sum of money at that time and used that to travel the world and seek purpose and find ways to help her fellow man for the next few years. For educated women at the time, options for bringing about meaningful change were limited to school teaching, medical care, or missionary work. Now, while she was traveling here in Chicago in 1886, we had the Haymarket Riots, which was a protest turned deadly by workers seeking an 8-hour workday and safer working conditions. This and a similar event in Chicago in 1894 called the Pullman Railroad Strike, which led to the now national holiday we call Labor Day, made times very hard. And of course, they were hardest for immigrants. The Italians, Germans, Polish Jewish, and a large population of Irish workers were suffering both at work and at home in a city where they had little access to education or services to assist them in achieving the American dream. And they were all fighting each other. That started to change in 1881, when Jane Addams and a woman named Ellen Gates Starr visited London's Toynbee Hall settlement house together and decided to bring that idea back to the US, and they bought an old mansion called the Hull House. A settlement house is different than a charity house in a number of ways. It's a community center, a school, a daycare, an art studio, a recreation hall. It is so many things that Hull House eventually grows to be 13 buildings. Jane Addams launched programs that mostly catered to and benefited women and children in all walks of life. She provided them health care and teaching and access to things that they would never have otherwise. The Progressive Era, which was the era between the 1880s and 1920s, as it's now called in the US, can be traced right back to Hull House. Florence Kelley, who was the most influential social reform pioneer in the nation for women and children at the time, we have her to thank for both the 8-hour workday and the law prohibiting kids under the age of 14 from working in the US, was herself a tenant of the Hull House in 1891. She had left a physically abusive husband, and it was Kelley who urged Jane Addams to not only help the victims of poverty, but attack poverty at its source. And in the 1900s, Jane Addams would go on to do just that. She advocated for workers and immigrants in a big way. She spoke at national political and social conventions, and she even played a role in founding both the NAACP and the ACLU. It is astounding what she achieved in one lifetime. And then during World War I in 1915, Addams was a vocal peace advocate, which was not a popular opinion at the time, and it did land her the Nobel Peace Prize later in 1931. She was the first American woman to receive that prize, by the way. Now, sadly, she died in 1935 after complications from a heart attack and cancer as well. If it feels like I'm glazing over her many contributions to modern society, both in the US and internationally, I am. There is so much that Jane Addams accomplished in one lifetime that without a dedicated museum or a 2-hour tour, I simply can't cover it all. Luckily for us, that museum exists. Today, Hull House is part of the University of Illinois Chicago campus in the near West Side neighborhood, and it's open to the public as a museum remembering the life and works of Jane Addams. You can check out hullhousemuseum.org and see their exhibits, collections, programming, and more when you plan your visit. It is tour guide approved. Find the link to that museum below and add it to your list the next time you visit our city. And if you enjoyed this video, consider joining me or one of the many talented tour guides with free tours by foot for a pay-what-you-like walking tour. We offer them all over the city, sharing stories of great individuals like Jane Addams. The link to our tour calendar is below. Please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel to support the work I do, and I will see you next week.